I was just thinking about the sort of the catch-22 situation of a political party here in the UK, and the whole idea of placing importance upon harm as opposed to pleasure. It's this idea. It's a theory that comes from this guy called David Benatar, who's a philosopher, and he talks about he's a sort of a propagator of antinatalism, which is the concept of that it's better for you not to have been born, because coming into existence then implies that you will somehow suffer harm, or you will have suffering, and we place more emphasis on the avoidance of suffering than we do in the in the seeking or the gaining of gratification of pleasure. Similarly, so it's like a sort of utilitarian argument, whereby a murderer, for example, gets put in prison. He's the guilty one because he has perpetrated suffering on someone. He's placed suffering upon his victim, whereas we don't care about the pleasure that the murderer has had. So more emphasis more inference is placed on harm than it is on the seeking out of pleasure. So when a government makes any actions, this is going back to the sort of the paradox of party politics. When a government makes actions, when it's critiqued for those actions by the opposition party or by the media or by any sort of speculative sort of group, even someone like me, the focus is always on the harm that each action will do. So regardless as to how popular any government is, it will always, in some respects, be criticised. You can't please all the people all the time. The Abraham Lincoln quote there thing. However, again, this is a perfectly sort of natural human thing. It's how it's how anything moves forward. It's the basis of the dialectic. The dialectic nature and just reasoning in general, the way that two ideas can come together to form a new reality based from those two sort of seedlings. So I think it's strange the way we have the thing set up in Westminster, and I think it reflects the dialectical nature of politics in the UK. The way we have these sort of two great sort of forces just bashing at each other. The government will put one thing out, and then the opposition will put a thing out that contradicts that, or they'll contradict it. They'll argue against it. They'll pick holes in it. They'll critique it to the best of their ability, as will the media. Again, this is how anything moves forward. But then you look at, for instance, not the UK Parliament based in Westminster. You look at the Scottish Parliament, or for instance, some European parliaments, for instance, Germany, and they have a different system, whereas we have first past the post here at Westminster. They work on proportional representation, so you get a lot more coalition governments, and the way that their buildings are structured, the German Reichstag and Scottish Parliament, Holyrood House, I think it's called, or something like that. It's a much more of a sort of like a melting pot, where you've got everyone sort of sat round, and the ideas are sort of hovering in the air, and as opposed to the sort of boxing that goes on every week in the House of Commons. But when a government does come into power, and this is getting on to the whole paradoxical situation, when a government does come into power, it will always suffer criticism, abuse, and it wants to deal with the naysayers and the haters and everyone who sort of dicks on their policies and things by implementing ideas that take effect in the short term to sort of secure their vote, to gather popularity, to say, look, when they come out of office, they can say, look at us, this is what we did, unemployment fell, for example. So these are short-term policies that take effect anyway. So when they leave office, you'll have things that they implemented in the short term, then perhaps coming back to bite the next government in the long term, and things that the government will try and work for in the long term, will perhaps just go down like a ton of bricks in the short term, and everyone will hate them for it. So they're sort of, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if you implement short-term policies that, which in the long term cause suffering, you're called up on it, and you're called out on it, and they'll say, look at the mess you left us in, look at this, that, and the other. This is, you know, whereas anything that you benefit, try and benefit in the long term, again, you'll just be taken to task for it by the opposition and by the media. So it works in two ways. So again, a way of dealing with this would be to increase the length of the parliamentary terms, to see the fruits of any government's endeavours for things that they're trying to work out in the long term. But again, that's something that's totally undemocratic, in the view of some, and it will be a little unjust, and it will be damn hard to get a consensus on the length of a term, because, funnily enough, it's like boundary changes. We had this whole thing, or House of Lords reform. People are in favour for it so long as it benefits them. Oh yeah, no, I'd love to extend the length of a parliament from 4 or 5 years to 10 years, as long as I'm the one who's in government, you know. They'll wait till they're in opposition and they'll say it's rubbish. That's just the way of it. It's like decorating a room that you're only going to live in for a couple of years. You tend to cut corners a bit, and you'll buy things for it that will only last a couple of years. You think, oh, I'm only going to be here a couple of years, and then you move out, and the next person moves in and goes, oh, this is crap, what the hell, this person left it in a complete fucking state, let's get back on here and let's sort this mess out that the other person's left. And then by the time they've done that, they've realised that their time's running out, so they want to get things looking nice for when, you know, when they have to move out, and then you're moving, oh, this is crap, this is rubbish. So it's just, it thunders on and on and on and on and on. And it's, and most weeks I look at it and I love it, I lap it up. I'm one of those sort of vultures when it comes to the media and things like that. I love just engaging with the news and seeing politics on the TV and in real life, and getting engaged with these things. But there are weeks where it's incredibly monotonous, and it's just this never-ending blame game of kind of who said what and how they said it, and the gaffes and the mess, and just revelations about someone's sex life, and it's just it gets to you after a while. It just gets you a bit down. But it's something that's in our nature. It's just something that's an inbuilt part of us. So it's a sort of a working paradox, this catch-22, that you're never in office long enough to implement something that's going to help you, that's going to help people in the long term. You're always just trying to cover your back, and that's because you're more worried about how good your party looks, how electable you are, rather than what's actually right. It's odd, isn't it? It's because people have so many different views on what's right and wrong that you're trying to come to terms with it's strange, the difference between what you want to elect and what is right, because it's just such a differing set of opinions. So no, this isn't me coming down on the side of any particular party. This isn't me advocating any sort of revolution. But I guess I'd have to have a think about what it will be like without any political parties. Again, it's just probably something for another video. Well, I've gone on for nearly about 9 minutes now, so I think I might give it a rest. But anyway, take care, and I'll have a think about that. Anyway, just a thought.